Hi, my name is Claire Gerard and I'm a curate at Hazlemere Church. This is a short reflection on Psalm 121. Now, Psalm 121 is, if you know the Bible at all fairly well known. We use it to encourage one another quite a lot. It's been made into a worship song, amongst other things. And it also forms part of the prayers that the Catholic Church still recite every day at Vespers. But I'd like to talk to you first of all a little bit about the Psalm's origins. So Psalm 121 is part of a group of Psalms that are known as the Psalms of Ascent. It's Psalm 120 to Psalm 134 approximately, and these 15 Psalms form this group that scholars believe either one of two things. Either the people of Israel sung these psalms on pilgrimage to Jerusalem, perhaps also on their return from exile in Babylon, or else the Levites, that's the priests from within the people of Israel, would sing these psalms as they ascended the steps to the temple. 15 steps up to the temple, 15 psalms, one psalm per step. They're particularly interesting because each set of 3 psalms follows a sort of pattern. The first of the 3 is a psalm of lament, the second of the 3 is a psalm of hope, and the third of the 3 is a psalm of celebration. And Psalm 121 fits into the second of that pattern. So Psalm 120 laments the state of exile that the Jewish people found themselves in. Psalm 122 rejoices in their arrival, and Psalm 121 that we're looking at today sets their eyes on the return to Jerusalem. If we look at the outline, the first 2 verses are an expression of trust. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord. And the following verses 3 to 8 are a blessing, a prayer of blessing over the people as they travel. So there are 2 voices at work in this psalm. The first, the psalmist, expressing trust in God, and the second, perhaps a priest, praying this blessing over the people as they travelled towards Jerusalem. The words watch over or keep occur 6 times in the psalm, and Yahweh, the name of the Lord, occurs 5 times. So it's really clear what the focus is here. Yahweh will watch over you. The prayer is that as they travel, perhaps the return from exile, as I've mentioned, God would watch over them. Indeed, the very structure of the psalm, the centre of it, verse 5 says, "The Lord watches over you." A little bit of historical, cultural context, and perhaps a map would help here. The people, let's say they were on their way back from exile, starting in Babylon over here on this side. They'd have taken this journey, a little bit of an arc, roughly, along the river and then over and down towards Jerusalem. And along the way, they'd have had to go across several mountain ranges, perhaps one around about here, another one down here, and several other smaller ones along the way. Now, they would have known that crossing those mountains would be really dangerous. There were rocky terrains, dust and rocks and pebbles that you could stumble over. One false step and you'd be over on your ankle, or perhaps even worse. There'd be wild animals throughout the mountains, and also robbers and bandits hiding around corners. Not only that, but as the sun rose over the top of the mountains, in the morning it would be a fairly pleasant walk, but as the sun came over the top, they would have been scorched on their right side by that very, very hot sun. What you want is some kind of companion on your right-hand side to shield you from the sun. And then the Jewish people, or the people of that time and that place, talked of this thing called moonstroke. It was something that happened when you had to go on a long journey that would last several weeks or months. We'd call it lunacy, I suppose, a kind of craziness, like the opposite of cabin fever, if you like, of being outside and of journeying for a very long time without seeing your destination. We can try and picture it if we close our eyes. We're on this long journey home from exile, and we approach the mountains. We lift our eyes up to them and see in front of us this great big challenge. Where is our help going to come from? Who's going to protect our steps? Who's going to shade us from the sun during the day? And who's going to keep us from losing our mind on this long journey? It's quite clear that the priest is reminding the people not to look up to the mountains for their help. It's not creation that's going to help them. Indeed, there would have been several other people groups at that time who worshipped nature, the gods of nature, and they may have looked to the mountains for their help. Sometimes on those mountains could be found, indeed, Asherah poles and other places where different people would worship other gods. And the Levite priest, the priest of God's people of Israel, was saying, don't look to creation for your help. Look to Yahweh. He's the one who's going to get you through this journey. He's the one who watches over you. He never sleeps. He never slumbers. If you cast your mind back to the book of 1 Kings, there's that wonderful passage when Elijah's trying to wake up the gods of Baal. Perhaps they've fallen asleep, your gods, and that's why they're not answering you. But the priest in Psalm 121 is saying, Yahweh never sleeps. Yahweh is always going to watch over you. This was the main purpose, I think, of Psalm 121 as it was written. It's reassurance on this long journey that God isn't going to stop looking after you. Yahweh is the God of the voyager, the one who never stops in his accompaniment of the pilgrim and the traveller. So what does this mean for us today, this incredible psalm? Well, I've always thought of myself looking up to the mountains when I thought of this psalm, as that's where God is, but I believe it's probably more than that. We're very prone as voyagers on the Christian journey to look to a whole bunch of things for what Martin Luther calls remedies to our troubles. Maybe we look to financial security, maybe to youth and fitness and beauty, maybe to approval from others, or material pleasures, food, drink, holidays, nice things. But the God economy dozes off. The God beauty is fleeting. The God popularity comes and goes. And the God pleasure is short-lived. All of these things, if we look only to them for support, will eventually disappoint us. And Psalm 121 reminds us to reject these other avenues of help. Psalm 121 redirects our gaze and redirects our gaze to the God Yahweh, who promises to watch over us. For any pilgrimage, including our own through this life, the Lord never slumbers and continues to accompany us on our own pilgrimage. There's reassurance. The maker of heaven and earth, the very creator of the world, of humanity, of our bodies and of our destinies, never sleeps, and yet is so interested in the details of our lives, our comings and goings. But we know that sometimes we do stumble. The psalm says, he will never let your foot slip. And yet we know that that sometimes happens. We do stumble, we do faint. We only have to consider our present predicament, the pandemic that's raging its way across the world. What are we doing wrong? With all that's utterly heart-wrenching in the lives of human beings, right now and throughout history, does it mean we're doing something wrong? Or worse, does it mean that God really actually isn't with us? Of course it doesn't mean that. When these difficult things, these heart-wrenching things happen to us, illness or anxiety or grief or fear or loss or distress, any of those things, those troubles that Jesus says we will have, when they try to bring us down, what Psalm 121 reminds us is that God will never let them have ultimate power over our minds or over our souls or over our hearts. They cannot separate us from God's purposes. They might happen, we might stumble, but God is still there to pick us up and to help us to keep going on our journey. The biggest mistake I think we can make with any of these things is to believe that because we've stumbled, because we've fainted, because we feel scorched by life's hardships, to feel that God has abandoned us. That's not God's promise, and Psalm 121 reminds us, the Lord Yahweh watches over you. It shows us that the very same God who created heaven and earth is also alongside us and attends to us in our present troubles, so that darkness might not overcome our hearts. So, where do you lift your eyes? When you approach the mountains, where does your help come from? Your help is in the name of the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Amen.